Good morning out there, guys. I hope everyone is doing well. Today, I'm going to be sharing something. I'm going to be tackling, I guess, kind of a sensitive issue because what I'm sharing could be perceived as being critical of the Filipino culture, which that's not what I'm doing because if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I have a deep love and respect for the Filipino culture. I lived there for 11 years. I learned the language. My wife is a Filipina, so my family, my family's Filipino. But what I wanted to talk about today is something in which a particular aspect of the Filipino culture sometimes gets dysfunctional or gets really out of balance in some families. And I'm not talking about my family. This is not based on things that have happened to me or to my wife. I'm basing this on observations among the things that happen to among some of my friends. And just from living there for so long, I observed that this sharing thing is really, as I've mentioned before, I have a lot of respect for the fact that Filipinos try to share everything they have with their families as much as possible. I've mentioned the fact that my wife began working at age 19 and she began immediately sending money back home to make sure her siblings were taken care of. So I think that's a very admirable part of the Filipino culture. Having said that, there are times when the sharing issue gets out of balance, or there are times when certain families really take this idea of sharing and it turns into something that's dysfunctional. And here's what I mean. Basically, there are times when the breadwinner, the one who's earning the money, gets used or basically abused by other family members. And this is not something that's happened to me. It's not something that's happened to my wife, but it's something that I've observed happening in the Philippines before. And just to give you an idea of how this works sometimes, and in many cases, these are families that are extremely poor, not always, but one thing that happens sometimes is if you have a breadwinner, if you have, or more than one breadwinner, if you have people that are really doing their best to work and to get ahead and to try to earn money and try to save money, then other family members will come in and instead of trying to work themselves, they'll end up pulling that breadwinner down. That's what I hear referred to as the crab mentality in the Philippines, or that's part of the expression of the crab mentality. And to give you an example, what can happen sometimes is the one who has done the most and worked the hardest ends up kind of almost suffering more than anyone else. Because let's say you have three siblings in a family, just as an example, and let's say the eldest gets pregnant and drops out of the school. And then the middle child does graduate and gets a professional job, and he or she is working as hard as he or she can. And then you have the third, the youngest, the bunso. That's a male, and he gets a girl pregnant and moves in with her. Well, guess who ends up sometimes paying for everyone else's mistakes? It's the one who was trying to be responsible. So I've seen that happen, and my wife and I have seen situations where the person the person who's working has a lot of pressure put on him or put on her by the rest of the family to where that person just feels completely used. I can think of one time when my wife and I were living in Angeles City. One of our friends came to our house one time, and this particular friend said that she had sent basically her entire paycheck to her family. They lived in another part of the Philippines, and the family was complaining that it's not enough money. And this girl had sent everything. She didn't have any money to eat on, and so she wasn't coming there to ask us for money, but we gave her some anyway and just said, you have to eat. You have to keep at least enough for yourself to cover your basic expenses in eating, how are you going to provide for your family if you can't even eat? Yet her family didn't even seem to understand that. All they did was complain about how she's not spending enough money. And so sometimes what I'm saying is sometimes the provider, the one who's really trying to take care of everyone else, really gets used and abused. And this takes on some other weird manifestations. In some cases, you have parents who basically consider the children their retirement plan. And I'm not talking about parents who get up in years and just can't work anymore. There are scenarios where the parents say, okay, I'm 50 years old, my children are in their early 20s, I'm going to retire now and let my children take care of me. That kind of thing does happen sometimes. Or another thing that I've seen happen is that sometimes those who are asking for support will lie about the reasons they want support. I remember when we moved back here to the States, we were talking with a Filipino family, and the man of that family, the husband, said that he was trying to put one of his brothers through school. Then he found out that his brother at some point dropped out of school and didn't even tell him. He pretended he was in school, but was still receiving the help from his brother. So those are just a few examples. And like I said, I really admire the Filipinos, the way they share with each other. But just be aware that there are certain families in which this sharing thing gets really out of whack or dysfunctional or toxic or however you want to say it. And you're going to encounter that. And obviously, the Philippines does not have a monopoly on dysfunctional families. There are dysfunctional families here in the United States, everywhere. I'm just telling you one way that it expresses itself in the Philippines, in that culture is, like I said, you have a breadwinner or breadwinners, but sometimes it's just a single breadwinner that just gets used and abused by the rest of the family, and you're gonna see that happen. So anyway, you can feel free to comment on this if you want. And again, understand, I'm not talking about all families. I'm not talking about my family. I'm just saying you will see this happen in certain situations.